Steve Cannell had a license plate that said, "What if?" And that's where it comes from with most of us. Whether we're working on a series, whether we're trying to come up with a pilot, whether we've got an idea for a movie, what if?
A lot of times, people will make a disclaimer before they say it, like, not this, but, you know, or here's the bad version. I think after a while, it just becomes assumed, you know, that like we're all trying to figure this out. So here's a pitch, and maybe it works, and maybe it doesn't, or maybe it can trigger something, you know, for someone else.
I guess I just hope that the idea is good enough. Like, I'm not going to pitch it very well, but I think if the idea is good enough, then hopefully people will understand it, and you know, that's all you're really going for.
You have to trust that process. I mean, the process of sitting down when you have absolutely no idea what the story is going to be. You sit down with 5 other writers and you just start talking. What is this going to be? And that process inevitably leads to another conversation in which you throw that first idea out and you start with another one. And then it almost inevitably leads to a Black Friday or a Black Tuesday or a Black Wednesday when it just all dies and you're all staring at each other and you're saying, what the hell are we thinking? And we don't have an episode. To the next morning when you come in and you do it again and you go at it again, and you just have to trust that process, because out of that process will come something good.
The more forceful the pitch is, the more I appreciate it. Doesn't mean that I'm going to be sold on it any more than the one that is sort of quietly mentioned with a shrug. But the idea will be right there, and you're like, okay, that's the right thing.
Someone once said to me, "We write because we can't not write." And if we get an idea, we want to start pulling at it to see, well, where exactly is it going to go? Because inherently we are storytellers.
Well, some of it is what we talk about in the room. And some of it you sort of find when you sit down to actually write the script. You know, all of these characters have a sort of rich history, but that's sort of the fun of it, is having characters. You know, everybody is unique, and you know, no two characters are alike. They may have things in common, but then they also have ways in which they're different, and that makes it fun to write.
My personal process is very much put out a version and look at it and throw it up against the wall and see if any of it works, and then get away from it for a second and then come back. It's a very sort of messy process, for lack of a better word. You know, you just have to keep throwing stuff out and then coming back and then going at it again. Sometimes the first one's good, but even then, it always needs, you know, some kind of shaping.
I don't know if in TV, maybe there is, you can have a truly uncompromised vision because you're making compromises all the time it's a collaborative medium. I know when something feels right, but I don't know when that's going to happen. So that's one of the hardest things. And I think that's the most important thing, is to try to, as best you can, say, these are the parameters and this is what we're looking for.
It's not mechanics, it's panic. It's panic. You know you've got to shoot and it's coming up and there's 3 days away and we've got to get the script out, and if we don't have an idea, we got to figure it out. It's part solitary, it's part social, it's part screaming, it's part crying, it's part laughing. It's, you know, and when it works, it is magic. It really is.
We kind of came into season 2 thinking, boy, we already got a season under our belt, this should be really easy now. But actually, if anything, it was like doubly as hard, and that's because we had all these elements that we had to keep juggling and balancing and keeping in mind. In season 1, a lot of stuff we were just sort of making up as we went along, you know, black boxes and guardians and stuff. And now in season 2, we had to keep all that in mind.
Every time I read a script, I'm just kind of in awe of the writer's abilities to juggle all these different storylines and all these different characters.
I know about this place because I was on the strike team that burned it down. I quarterbacked the op.
I've heard the Americans are unhappy that Zetrov is expanding onto their continent.
Having Amanda in power at Division and Percy sort of down in the basement, it was logical that both Nikita and Alex would be going up against her in their own ways this season.
One of the writer's primary jobs, if not his or her primary job, is taking sort of the mass of story points, ideas, facts that everyone sort of tosses out in the writer's room and tries to marshal that into one single coherent episode. In a lot of ways, trying to organize all of that and bring some kind of coherence to it is really the writer's job. And for me, once you can see that line all the way through a particular story, or a line for a character all the way through, half the battle is done.
First rule of writing is you sit down and you ask what does your character want? And it seems like a simple question on this show, but A, that question's not always easy, because you do ask, what does Alex want? Well, she wants to take Zetroff back. No, actually she doesn't. She just wants her mother back. And there's layers to what everyone wants. And once you get into the skin of that, on a show like ours, where there's so many minefields, and you ask yourself the second question, which is why can't they have it? Then you've got this, incredible minefield that they have to navigate.
The most exciting thing about writing the show, both in the first season and the second season, has always been the characters. Really, the fun, meaty stuff, at least for a writer, is getting into the characters. And you get to do everything from heartfelt romantic scenes to deep, dark torture scenes that get to the very bottom of a character's soul. To, their feelings about family and parents and homes.
I don't understand Katya's choices. She could have been in on Semok's plan all along. No, I think that she's misguided and not facing reality. You're not in control anymore, Percy. I am.
You give no meaning to the phrase insult to injury.
I have a mole burrowed deep within that agency, waiting to be activated.
We never talk about trust and loyalty as a concept in the room. What we talk about is these people who are all trustworthy and loyal, except when they have things put in front of them that make them change the way they are.
You want a character to be well-rounded, and that means that it's more than just a girl or, a guy. You write the characters based on the kind of person you think that they are.
Alex is a trustworthy and loyal person. She's loyal to Nikita. She was always loyal to Nikita. However, if there's something bigger that she wants for herself, Nikita! She's willing to betray that loyalty to Nikita to get at what she wants.
It was an expected thing. It would have been weird if she didn't. So that's one of those things where you know the character, and the writers really know their characters. The twists come in plot. The characters they have very strong personalities.
I guess you'd say that in this season, all of the bonds between our characters have been tested, even Michael and Nikita, certainly Alex and Nikita, but that ultimately they had these things in common and they came back together.
What we do in our show, and we do it in every episode, whatever you think is going to happen at the end of the episode, we do at the beginning. And then you're like, well, what? Well, now what's going to happen? Because I thought that was going to happen later. Now you've set up for a season 2 that's really interesting.
It's not having everyone be feeling like they're lost on their show or have nowhere to go with their characters. There are so many twists and turns per episode that I can't guess where it's going to even go, and they don't like to tell us either.
Our bad guys and our good guys were having trust issues amongst themselves and with each other, and so it made for this really fun web where we were able to do pair-ups and partnerships you wouldn't think possible. Amanda and Nikita teaming up for, an episode, and then a couple episodes later, they're in a hand-to-hand fight.
I guess for me personally, female characters are a lot more interesting because of the complexity they present just by virtue of their gender, especially when you're talking about female warriors. And that makes it much more interesting.
Amanda's always had a sort of strange connection to Nikita and has tried to correct the mistakes she made with Nikita in her relationship with Alex, and I think kind of ends up making the same mistakes again. And so there's just something interesting about, seeing these 3 women and their relationship.
I think that women are driven a lot more on emotions, and I think that that's how they run their business. Amanda kind of plays the whole closed-off emotion, but then you notice that she's in bed with Ari, and she is actually in love with a man that's in business with her to try and take over. So you know that there's an emotional attachment to that. And that's what I love about the show, is that the female characters really are what's driving the stories along.
Obviously, Nikita's relationships with every single character in the cast is a different and multi-layered one. And Amanda and Nikita have a really dynamic, complex relationship and past.
That was my first impression of Amanda. She brought me into her office and she just focused on me. In season 2, the relationship that interests me is the relationship with Amanda, because we're slowly revealing it through the season what they were really like together. Because nobody really knows. We haven't seen early Nikita until season 2.
Nikita and Alex were both, to a certain extent, raised by her. There's a lot of push and pull, you know, the way there is between real-life mothers and daughters.
I broke your heart. You broke mine. Breach the door now.
I think that these writers have really done a great job of making this geopolitical sort of thriller also deeply psychological, emotional, personal drama.
It's basically about, you know, finding a way for your characters to get themselves in a situation where they're going to have to pay an emotional price, not just a tactical price, not just a black box, but some kind of emotional price. You know, again, it's kind of a paradigm for our show where the characters get into these situations where they have to either expose themselves emotionally and thereby lose tactically.
And that's kind of a fun thing to do. I mean, that's really the way that you want your characters to move and evolve. You want to see how they go from one position that seems like the absolute right thing for them to do in the beginning and end up in another position by the end, which should seem equally right to them by the end.
It's difficult. I think it got a little thick halfway through this season, and we realized, because sometimes you need to invent a new character.
Every division operative knows the risks. Deniable assets, that is who we are.
Well, that's not who I am. I'm going after her.
Sean always had his had a sort of set of beliefs, and it was just like he's fairly consistent with them. I mean, he's sort of guy who believes in the flag and America and apple pie, and even when his mother kind of doesn't believe in those principles as much or betrays those principles, he still keeps them. And I think he just, you know, he was put in a situation where Division didn't fit that, and when he found the people who did, then he gravitated towards them. So I never felt like he was like a bad guy.
He's a Navy SEAL. Navy SEALs are good guys, and he's one of the good guys. He rationalized what he was doing at the beginning of the season, going after Nikita, working for Division, just because he had to protect his mother. I mean, the only thing that came for his country was his family. Now it's his country.
Writers are notoriously finicky. Everyone has their own process, everyone has their own schedule. TV writers probably don't get as much freedom, I guess, to dictate when they can be inspired and not. Television shows come out every week. That's sort of the monster. You have to keep feeding it.
There is no writer's block. You know, you have to kind of work through it. If you get stuck, you got to sit down and think about it, walk away from it. But even if you walk away from it, you're still working on it, even though you don't, know you're working on it.
I don't know how people did it before computers. I mean, I guess sitting around with a typewriter in your imagination is a really hardcore way to go. It's kind of the romantic view of the writer. But these days, I need a solid internet connection somewhere, because anytime I get stuck, I can look things up and see if it'll jog anything. I tend to have more of a research-based approach to writing. I used to be a journalist, so I like to ground things in facts. I'll use Wikipedia, I'll use blogs, I'll use YouTube, anything that'll help.
I used to be a journalist at the Miami Herald. I worked with Dave Barry, who's a humor columnist, who said that 90% of writing is, sitting and thinking, shooting hoops, walking around, jotting stuff down. 10% of writing is this. And that's the truth. So, I mean, I think for us, it's very much, you just do it.
everybody kind of pulls together. When we're short on time and you take an act and somebody else takes another act, and it's kind of interesting because you would think that when you looked at the finished product, it would be all over the map. But I think because we do have a sense of who the characters are, it ends up being pretty close to what you wanted it to be, and sometimes even better.
We also like to refer to old TV shows and movies, so if a story reminds me of something that I've seen before, I'll go and look up that clip and see how they approach that particular plot problem or that particular character moment.
Reference is big with me. On this show, there's been kind of a game in the writer's room because apparently I mention a few certain movies. They keep coming up. We actually have on the board out there, we have some sort of joke about it. X-Men 2 has come up a lot for some reason this year. Aliens, G.I. Joe, the old cartoon series. It always somehow comes up. But yeah, definitely I'm inspired by movies, by other people's stories.
You have me and all of Division behind you.
You're all alone.
We have a big theme of sort of parental betrayal on the show. A lot of our characters have been let down by the authority figures in their lives and the people who raised them. I think you could point to pretty much every character on the show has some kind of facet of that dynamic going on.
Nothing is more important than division.
I don't think there is a clear hero-villain line on this show except for Percy.
Percy believes that what he is doing, at least initially believed that what he is doing, is for the good of the country. Nikita believes that what she is doing is for the good of humankind, if you will.
With Nikita, it's all, she wants to right wrongs. She wants to atone for past sins.
Is there evil within her? She does bad things. She is capable of doing very bad things, and she is cognizant of that in herself, which I think makes her a much richer human being.
Even the heroes have to murder. And I think that the first season, when Alex killed Tom, I think that's one of the first times she ever changed. And then when she killed Vlad, the man that kept her as a sex slave, I think that changed her even more. And so you've got these powerful people that are trying to fight for good, but they're killing people along the way, and that's kind of what I think the good characters struggle with, is what is right and wrong with that. And I think that she also is confused with those blurry lines as well. I mean, is she doing better good than not? But I think that at the end of the day, it's all for her, survival.
It's a big dysfunctional family, Division. They're the parents. They say you must obey or you die. They've got all these kids there that they're trying to mold. And Nikita's sort of the hippie daughter who ran out, and now she's kind of found responsibility and is coming back and saying you shouldn't parent that way. And I'm gonna make sure that that abuse stops.
I mean, I look at this year versus last year. I think her arc has been pretty major, and then it's gonna, at the very end, when she decides that she's going to be a part of Division, it's like going full circle.
She is on a kind of journey this season, and I think she's really looking for a place where she can look at the things she's done and say, I'm okay with that.
We made a deal to save Division, and now it can be. Because it made you.
I think that when we have loss and we suffer, we do see red in a way that, is undeniable. And I think that revenge is certainly never the way to go. We all make choices, obviously, based on what we've been through, but with Nikita, at some point, you've got to see the bigger picture. At some point, it's got to fade into something different.
The theme, major theme of this season is home. And Nikita wants to take down Division so that she can get to finally get to a home, you know, which is safe, kind of a life on the beach, you know, with Michael. The whole season is about how Nikita slowly but surely, and maybe against her will, starts to realize that her destiny, or these two things, are one and the same.
But she starts out in a motel room and she ends up in Division.
We knew at the end of the season that we wanted Nikita to take over Division. We knew that that wasn't going to be something that we could just twist right at the end and say, oh, she does, because for the character, that's the last thing she would want to do. You know, take it down maybe, not, but keep it going.
Amanda, she left in a hurry yesterday. She wouldn't say where she was going, and now she's gone completely off the grid.
We need to leave here now, before some enterprising young agent comes gunning for me in my job.
So by the end of season 2, Amanda and Ari are on the run. Ironically, they kind of end up in a cheap motel, the same kind of place we found Nikita and Michael at from the beginning of the season. There's a little ironic justice there. But you know that that's not where they're going to end up in the end. They'll resurface somehow. But there's a nice parallel there.
Some of those things are planned. Some of those things are not planned. I think that the biggest thing that I can think of this season that was not planned, planned far in advance, was the idea that Amanda and Ari had a relationship together.
We're still, actually, that's the funny thing, we're still figuring out where exactly she's in the final episode, but we have to land what she's doing, because she's kind of gone off.
So it was one of those things where we watched what happened as the episodes developed and sort of played off of them. And we saw what the actors were bringing to the characters and what the actors were bringing to that tension. And then that informed a lot of our story-making decisions as well.
Don't worry, dear. I'll send a team. More than one. You might want to keep an eye out for them. Some free advice? Bundle up. It's cold out there.
I think one of the best things about being a TV writer is every day is kind of an adventure. It's always different. You never know what you're going to have to face when you walk into the office in the morning. One day you may be sitting in front of the computer all day just sort of banging out a script. Another day you're working on prep. Another day you're in editing and you're sitting there cutting together the episode that you wrote and saw produced.
This is Wrath. We have a policy on this show that the directors, cut the full body of the footage they have, but not to bring it to time. We want to see everything they, the whole story show, and then we want to decide which parts, which scenes to cut, which lines to cut, whatever, to bring it down to time.
It's what Craig establishes in this room, which is everybody is expected to throw out ideas. And because everybody's encouraged to articulate their own individual perspective on it, you get a lot of varying points of view.
This is such a good show. It all works as is, but, he's got to figure out a way to make it work, make it work shorter. Everything that we've taken out played really well.
The scene past this, I know I have a note to cut some stuff and restore some stuff.
And if you don't have the right idea, you look to someone else. We all stand on each other's shoulders, and it's vital.
Okay, so what I was thinking that we could lose here was back to her, and then he goes, but that's just survival instinct. I think that what anybody wants from another artist is to see that person. It's just to see that person being honest, and and at some point you're going to take the blame for it anyway, so you may as well put yourself out there so that when it's all done, you don't say, oh, that sucked, but it really wasn't me. I think you want to be able to say that was me. That would be the other way.